Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a react video to Chappell Roan's newest TikToks. If you have been living under a rock, or perhaps you're not one of the fellow gays, you probably may not know her, but chances are you do. And she posted some TikToks today that I think are really important to have an open discussion about in terms of like boundaries and fame and what that gives people license that they think they have to take advantage of somebody or perceive somebody. So before we get to it, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button and the bell so you're notified of all future videos. I am still trying a lot of different things out on this channel. It's just been my first few videos. I'm still like learning the cadence of editing and uploading and getting the word out there. So I would love your support. Let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like. You might have noticed that my camera is in all different spaces. I did add a few things to my room and do some rearranging, so I'm trying out this system since my last video. The camera kept dropping and it was not a good look, and it was very, very zoomed in, so I'm trying more of a zoomed out approach now. So we're gonna go ahead and watch these TikToks. Got my headphones so they don't cut into the audio.
I need you to answer questions. Just answer my questions for a second. If you saw a random woman on the street, would you yell at her from the car window? Would you harass her in public?
That's a good point. I think obviously this is coming from a very charged place. Chappell's upset, clearly, and this hasn't been a secret. Obviously, like I said, if you know Chappell and her meteoric rise to fame, it wasn't a secret, right? Like, she'd been pursuing music for probably the last 10 years and all of her endeavors. So you can tell she just looks tired and she's been touring. It's been exhausting and I really empathize with her. So let's keep watching.
Would you go up to a random lady and say, "Can I get a photo with you?" And she's like, "No, what the fuck?" And then you get mad at this random lady? Would you be offended if she says no to your time because she has her own time?
I agree with this. And in this hypothetical, obviously, she's portraying how strange the act of fame is and becoming a famous person. It's like your persona, not that I'm a famous person, but I can empathize with the fact that your persona becomes out of your control. To an extent, you build this foundation of your identity and what you're here for, whether it's an artist or musician or singer or performer of any kind. And as fame takes off, you lose that and you are overly perceived and you lose your autonomy, as Drew says in a later video that we'll watch after this. I really empathize because there's this feeling that you're not yourself or you don't have control anymore. And I'm echoing a little bit of what Drew said, but it's scary to think that you don't seem like a person to other people anymore. They have idolized you and you have these obsessed sycophants who dehumanize you. It's unfortunate.
Would you stalk her family? Would you follow her around? Would you try to dissect her life and bully her online? This is a lady you don't know. And she doesn't know you at all.
This act of internet culture has connected us more than ever before, but sometimes I wonder if that's at a cost of our compassion and our humanity. If you put this, like Chappell says, in the POV of somebody who's just a random person on the street, this feels wrong, right? This feels morally out of context, and you would feel sympathy for someone who was randomly being harassed or bullied by somebody in public. But when you put it in the context of today's world and today's internet and how you're always connected, you think of people as young as middle and high school who are on social media and they have no reprieve. They don't get to escape when they get home. I remember being able to turn off. Yeah, we had instant messengers and the internet was starting when I was young, but not to the extent it is now. You are always being perceived, and there is never privacy, nor is there a sense of decorum and etiquette. And I don't say that to be a prude necessarily. I do say that to emphasize this culture where people's spaces are not respected. And we saw this with Britney Spears in the 2000s. If you haven't read her book, I highly recommend it. I'm probably going to do a separate video on the Crossroads movie and how much awful feedback that got when I saw it as an adult recently, and it wasn't that bad. It was a fine movie. I had no problems with it in the context of a woman fully grown now. I look back and I'm like, oh, what a sweet little coming of age story. But I remember she got raked over the coals for that, especially being a woman in pop. And she was very stigmatized as being this like girly girl, vapid, and that's besides the point. But I see a parallel here where people feel owed, like they are owed her space. And Chappell is overwhelmed by that because when you're a regular person on the street, that space is sacred to you, with the exception of people who don't respect that. And but those people are ostracized. Those people are called out in public most of the time. There are consequences to doing that. In this instance, there are none because it's like, oh, well, you're famous and you chose that, which she'll get into in the next video. But just because somebody chooses a certain path and makes it big as an entertainer does not give someone license to invade their personal space and their time. You have times when you do your shift or you're at your job, hypothetically, where you're on for that amount of time and you're off. We're not, there is nuance here where, trust me, when you're salaried, that gets a little bit blurred. But typically, especially if you're like an hourly employee somewhere, once you're off, and that cuts and that's over. When you're an entertainer, when you are a public figure, you don't get that luxury. You are your brand and you are the artist to many people. A lot of people can't separate that, and I argue to an extent you can't really separate an art from their artist, but not when it comes to their personal space and their boundaries as a person. Just because they are on the world stage does not take away their humanity and their right to privacy in their own homes, in their own space when they're walking around. They shouldn't be afraid for their lives. And that is a fact, and unfortunately, it's just not followed a lot of times. And I can see it on her face, just this sense of fatigue and frustration. It's messed up, you guys. And women as a whole, we don't even feel safe most of the time when we're out by ourselves. We have to be hyper vigilant. Our heads are on a swivel. We're always looking to make sure that someone isn't following us or has ulterior motives. So times that by 1,000 if you're a regular person like me. It's exhausting. So I wanted to point that out as someone who is a woman and a queer woman at that, and just seeing how she's reacting this way. I don't think it's unreasonable. And again, people like Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes, we look at these celebrities who didn't necessarily have as much of like a freedom of forum to say these things. So I am appreciative that there's this evolution of like autonomy and opinions, but it still hurts that she is so hurt by people's lack of respect.
Would you assume that she's a good person? Assume she's a bad person? Would you assume everything you read about her online is true? I'm a random bitch. You're a random bitch. Just think about that for a second, okay?
So that's the first video. And at the end of the day, aren't we all just random bitches on the internet talking to each other? We're just pixels on a screen, me to you, whether I live next door or I live 5,000 miles from you. It's an important takeaway. And there's this chronically online subset group of people who fail to separate reality from this like simulated environment where they feel they have a right to people's time and space just because, well, I'm a fan, well, I'm this. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're even her sister or her mother or anybody, if you're her best friend. If she needs space, she needs space. There was that huge controversy about, I believe, the woman who was a surfer, and she got together with her boyfriend, and he somehow had a problem with her wearing bikinis after they got together. Him saying he wasn't comfortable with that, there was this lack of understanding online about what a boundary meant, and he seemed to think that that was a boundary. Him saying, like, well, that's my boundary that you can't wear bikinis. No, a boundary is something you assert for yourself. You cannot force yourself on other people to have a boundary. That's called manipulation. That's called coercion and manipulation, and it sucks. So I think it's just an important dialogue about women being able to express themselves without being seen as hysterical, without this being invalidated or taken out of context or minimized just because, oh, well, she chose to be famous, so this is the consequences of that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a random mother on the street or a celebrity. We should respect people's spaces at the bare minimum. And there's, again, this lack of reality that people have where they think they can act however they want in public. They can make a scene. Men can chase after women with these stupid commentary videos trying to ask them, how many men have you slept with? And does that lower your value? I see these just absurd things that should not be okay. Where is shame culture? Why? There are spaces and times that people should be shamed because these things are not normal and we need to stop acting like they are. And just because it was handled badly back in the day, 20 plus years ago, doesn't mean that this kind of behavior should continue. So that's my TED Talk for now. We have the first video. I am going to pull up the second video and we're going to go from there.
I don't care that abuse and harassment, stalking, whatever, is a normal thing to do to people who are famous or a little famous, whatever. I don't care that it's normal. I don't care that this crazy type of behavior comes along with the job, the career field I've chosen. That does not make it okay.
Again, she's absolutely right. Just because you've chosen a specific career type, this especially is true for sex workers. Just because somebody works at a club or like a nightclub or a bar or is a drag queen or is a performer, it doesn't give you the right. It just doesn't. And just because you're like, well, that sucks, but they were famous and that's just part of the risk. We have to stop being okay with that kind of behavior. Just point blank. We just have to be.
That doesn't make it normal. It doesn't mean I want it. It doesn't mean that I like it. I don't want whatever the fuck you think you're supposed to be entitled to whenever you see a celebrity.
It's a sense of entitlement is the perfect way to put it. And to elaborate on that, there always is like a power imbalance, right? Especially between women and men, where we always feel like we have to placate them or play to a certain narrative in order to de-escalate a situation. And I appreciate that she's not doing that. She's not just caving and giving in to that kind of societal norm. Which, are we surprised? Our lesbian girly pop Chappell is not going to take this laying down, and she shouldn't. Nobody should. If they are being harassed or if someone's being a victim of something, we need to believe them unless there are hard facts to prove otherwise. I think it is important to pursue the truth. But it also is important that most of these people don't come out and say these things with no stake in it. They don't say it just to say it. There's usually almost like 99.9% of the time, there are valid points to why they're saying those things and why they're expressing it. So taking that moment to be compassionate about that and understand that just because you see a celebrity walking down the street doesn't mean that you're able to chase them down, harass them, try to get pictures and autographs and all of this stuff. They're normal people too, and they get tired and have long days and need to rest just like anybody else. And we're not going to be perfect. Humans make mistakes all the time. So let's just have some compassion and empathy and not forget that, yes, these people are larger than life figures to everyday Joe Schmo walking down the street. But again, that doesn't mean that you have a permission slip to go harass them. Paparazzi included. Paparazzi are probably some of the most horrible, wicked kind of people because they make money off of harassing and stalking people. And again, like she said, this behavior is very normal. We love it. We glorify it on magazines. We slap it up everywhere we can because we have to get the latest scoop. Absolutely gross.
I don't give a fuck if you think it's selfish of me to say no for a photo or for your time or for a hug. That's not normal. That's weird. It's weird how people think that you know a person just because you see them online.
Yeah, that's the problem with, I think, parasocial relationships and with the rise of generations who are lonelier than ever, let's be real, but the rise of generations who are lonelier than ever, and the more connected we are through digital like pipelines and spaces, the more disjointed we feel in real life because we don't have that physical connection and tether. I'm frustrated and I'm just feeling a lot because this parasocial element is dangerous. And one of the things that I really want to continue having discussions about on this channel are debunking misinformation because it's so dangerous. And there are so many there's you can fall down a conservative like alt-right pipeline so fast. There have been sociologists on TikTok and other places who have done studies and research to dissect this and study it more, because all you have to do is follow one path and you're on 300 videos and you suddenly think that attacking somebody in public or playing a prank by stealing cars is normal. And we have to pull back and rein it in to realize and have a discourse about the fact that, like, this should not be normalized. This should not be given space online. And that goes for online people who are predators and misogynists and rapists and all sorts of awful things that we're seeing online lately, especially in the YouTube space. So let's clean out the trash. Let's take out the trash on the YouTube space and just have some candid conversations. I want you to be safe, and what Chappell's doing here is really admirable, and I have so much respect for someone who asserts their space and asserts their boundaries. You wouldn't just go up to a random person and ask for a hug. And if you did, you'd probably be looked at very strangely. And let's not pretend that that's not the case.
Listen to the art they make. That's fucking weird. I'm allowed to say no to creepy behavior. Okay?
So that's that video. And also, you don't get to tell Chappell what she considers creepy or not, especially if it's something that goes in her personal space. Someone who touches her might not be something she's okay with, and you have to accept that answer. That is the case with consent with anybody. And that's the bigger conversation again that I want to bring it back to. Consent is so important, and like my first video, I think in the cosplay community and just general big spaces of people, we lose sight of that very, very quickly. Consent isn't just because it's cute. Consent is so important. Just because someone doesn't want something, just because you're butthurt about it, doesn't change the situation, and it doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. And you shouldn't make somebody feel bad about saying what they need in that moment. Wherever you are. This could be at a library, this could be at a bar, this could be anywhere, regardless. If you buy someone a drink and they don't accept it, that's not their problem. Especially because women are always trying to protect themselves, and I see so many people still getting drugged out at bars, still getting taken advantage of. We have no space that can just be a woman's space. And her saying that this is creepy behavior is not unusual, it's not shocking, and if you feel like that's a problem, that she's being open about this, I really want you to take a moment to think why that is, and really critically think and step back on what you think is like normal in everyday society. Truly. And I don't mean that maliciously, but this just gets me keyed up because boundaries and consent are something we are having more dialogue about now, but it's just really not talked about in depth enough, and there's just generally not enough education equally across younger people on respecting consent. And it's such an easy concept. If someone says no means no, no is a complete sentence. And it's so hard because women have been indoctrinated to be docile and to, again, de-escalate situations, that sometimes we are scared of saying no. And that's what people don't understand either. I say people when I mostly mean men. A lot of them just don't understand that there are a million things going in our head at once. Most of us have had to look both ways walking to our car after a shift at work. If a street light's out, we have to have keys in our knuckles. We have to look around. We have to make sure no one's giving us weird looks. It's all tied together. So another video I wanted to point out that showed me this video was Drew. Drew Offwallow, if you haven't seen her, she is a queen. She is the moment in every way possible. So we're going to download her video and we're going to talk about it. I really think it's important to dovetail this conversation with Chappell's reaction and Drew's reaction, and then we can finish it off with my final thoughts on the whole thing, because women are a spectrum. I don't speak for all women, and nobody should. No one who's a woman should speak for all women. And that's okay. But I think it's important to demonstrate the spectrum of the damages of fame and how it can affect you. If you want to read a little bit more further into topics like this in general about how fame can tear you apart as a person, I highly recommend you watch. Drew has something called The Comment Section, and it's like a podcast style where she interviews people. And she did interview Chappell Roan recently. I still have to watch the whole episode, but they do talk a lot about this that she mentions in the video. So let's go ahead and watch a little bit of it and see if we can dissect and dive into this a little bit further to elucidate things.
Hey, I want to talk to y'all about something serious and also topical. And if there's time, sure, I'll drag a man. Fuck it. You know what I mean? Anyways, a lot of people have been commenting on the video or DMing me personally, asking me my thoughts on Chappell Roan's videos that she just posted today. If you haven't seen them, please go watch them. The gist of the videos, though, is basically her saying that she doesn't like being harassed in public, regardless if you're a fan or not, and how it makes her really uncomfortable and she shouldn't have to get used to it, which I, first of all, 100% fucking agree with. Now, I assume a lot of people are tagging me or asking me my thoughts on it because she was on my show, The Comment Section, and we talked about that almost the entire time. We went into extensive detail about how she has been struggling with this aspect of her like meteoric rise. And now that she's put it on TikTok, I'm seeing a lot of discourse about it, and of course people are asking. So I'm going to tell you my thoughts, but I need you to keep two things in mind, right? First things first. This is not me saying in any way, shape, or form that I am of the same caliber of fame as Chappell Roan. She's an actual celebrity. I am but a dickhead online. Two, this is also not me saying this is the hardest job in the world and nobody understands, because I'm not a fucking dumbass, and that's just
i.e., she's not Michaela Noguera.
simply not true. Keep those two things top of mind, all right? Now, I can't speak to Chappell's experience, obviously, but I can speak to mine as someone who was an aggressively normal bitch before I started doing this for the last 3 years.
I love aggressively normal because there is like an element to just being a whole ass everyday person. Like, I would categorize myself right now as that, just like a normal ass person who posts to social media sometimes and writes and is a goob. So I totally agree with that.
Did not grow my platform until I was like in my mid-20s, and I have worked many fucking jobs, okay? From food service all the way to 9 to 5 corporate and everything in between, bitch. And I can tell you with the utmost conviction at this point that no amount of jobs, regardless of what industry they are in, could ever fucking prepare you for the problems you encounter doing this for a fucking living. There is no...
You don't get a manual. I see so many creators talking about navigating, copyright strikes with YouTube and aggressive stalking problems with fans. This is not something everyday people can directly relate to, but if you've ever been made uncomfortable or if your boundaries have been crossed on this baseline level, you know what this feels like. You just do, and there's no excuse for it.
Employee handbook for what to do when you're being perceived by millions of fucking people every fucking day of your entire life. You don't just have a job, you are the job. You
are the brand. That's something that made me wait a long time to be more public facing or do a job like this. I say job, it's not my job, but do something like this because the pressure of always being perceived is very overwhelming. It's very crushing to think that you have no place where you can just be not perceived. And that's, a whole look. I have a whole picture where I called it the do not perceive me look because it was during COVID and I was wearing like sunglasses and a mask. But I like my privacy. I like moments where I cannot be perceived. And I am appreciative that there's more discussion about this where two things can exist at the same time. You can be a public figure and also have a right to your privacy. Now, whether that's always validated or whether that's always abided by is a whole nother story, but that's why we're having these conversations, boo-boo.
Your name, your presence, your talent, whatever it is you have to offer the world of entertainment, you are your job and you are your company and you are your brand. So whether you're working or not, you are being perceived constantly, for better or for worse. And you don't have a say in any of it. You don't get a say in how you're being perceived, and you don't even get a say in how people treat you in public. Like, for example, for me, I've had to change doctors 3 times. I've had to change gynecologists twice. I had to change my bank twice. I once had someone ask me for a picture when I thought my dog was dying on an operating table. It was someone who worked in the veterinary office. Do you see what I'm saying? Even recently, someone said that I was really rude to them in an airport because I told them I'm about to miss my flight. I'm sorry, I can't talk. And this is just a side note.
This type of behavior, again, it's just this myopic view of, oh, well, since they're famous, they can afford to take pictures, or I'm owed a picture, or yes, fans, of course they're appreciative of fans. They wouldn't be who they are, they wouldn't have what they have without fans. Again, it doesn't mean that they have to give up their entire existence 24/7 to appease fans. That's not how that works. And the lack of awareness for something like that at a vet's office where you might think your dog is passing away, that's an extremely vulnerable moment. I could not imagine if I was sitting there, which I have had that happen, and have somebody come up to me and ask me for like a picture or something. Could you imagine? Just that sense of impersonality, like it feels like you're just like a simulacra of yourself, like you become so removed from who you are that people don't even see you as a whole person anymore. It's wild to think about.
But the reason I was running late for my flight that day was because TSA rejected half my family and was being really racist towards my family. So my family was very shaken, very unhappy, very afraid, and we were sprinting to a gate and someone tried to stop me. And I feel like when public people try to have these conversations, there's always this undertone of like, oh, you're so fucking ungrateful. Oh, I would love if fans came up to me and told me that they loved me. But see, what you're failing to factor in is those aren't the encounters that we're ever talking about when we're saying this makes me really uncomfortable. We're talking about all of the other ones outside of that. Like when someone
Yeah, you can have people and be grateful for it, but also have a boundary. I mean, you can have that, and you should have that with some of the people who are the closest in your life. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say, I can't do this right now, or I'm not available, or I'm not going to talk to you until you stop doing X behavior, especially if it's abusive behavior. So I think just think twice when you see somebody and assess the situation. If you see somebody who you identify as an influencer, regardless if they're an A-list celebrity or a micro influencer online, think about how they are feeling. Think about their shoes. Be in their shoes for a day in that moment and think, wow, they must look really tired. I better not bother them. Or even just a walking by compliment. Hey, love your outfit. Hey, I love you. Something quick that might be more appropriate than invading their personal space or demanding something of them, which is awful.
physically grabbed me from behind to turn me around really fast and shake me and tell me that she needed a picture with me. That kind of shit isn't normal and isn't okay. And when you are someone who's trying to assert a boundary like that as a public person with love and grace and understanding, the least fans can do is offer empathy, because you guys have no idea how dehumanizing it feels to be treated like a zoo animal every.
And this is the part that, it's not something I can really relate to, but a lot of what I'm saying kind of echoes Drew's points because I did watch these videos earlier. But I think it's important to, dive into why we view celebrities as less than people. Because we think, oh, because they're on TV, they have the perfect life, or they have enough money for XYZ and everything that they could ever want. And sure, maybe that's true on some levels. But again, it doesn't deprive them or take them away from their humanity. And we're all human. Like, we all have tired days. And I don't want to belabor that point, but just think about it.
Where you fucking go. It feels as if your autonomy is being stripped. And someone like Chappell, who I know okay, is a very good person, a very genuine person who genuinely loves her fans very much. The worst part about this feeling is that no one understands what it feels like unless they do it for a living. You care so deeply about your fans that you don't want them to ever think you're ungrateful for them, or you don't want to talk to them, or you never want to take pictures with them, because that's not the case for her. She just wants to be able to live her life without being forced to compromise her boundaries, because contrary to what people tend to say when this argument is brought up, no, she did not sign up for this. But what I think is most important to remember, whether it's Chappell or another influencer or anyone that you love, they are actual humans with thoughts and feelings and fears and anxiety. They are actual humans who have good days and bad days. They are not a figment of your imagination. They're not an idea. They're not just a thing that you are entitled to. They are people.
And I think this is also a bigger conversation of how society perceives women. We largely are perceived as objects or objects of desire and a role to be filled, you know? We are a wife, we are a mother. We can't just exist outside of those types of roles or assignments. And because we've been shoehorned into that type for so long, that type of treatment, I think, gets like by osmosis transferred into any role that we have. That's all we can be. We can't transcend these roles and these different things where we can be multiple things at once. You can be an entertainer and a mother. You can be both of those things, and they're both parts of you, and one doesn't take away from the other. So Chappell can be a celebrity, but also a random bitch, like she said, and she should have that allowance to do so.
That deserve respect the same way that you do. You feel me? And if all of that was too much to digest, here's a simple rule of thumb to go by if you meet famous people, influencers, what the fuck ever. Just don't be fucking weird, okay? Don't be weird, don't be creepy, don't be over familiar. 9 times out of 10, it's gonna go good for you. I promise. If you follow that simple rule, I swear to God, 9 times out of 10, I'm sure it will be fine. And everyone, leave Chappell the fuck alone, I swear to God. Okay, love you, bye.
Hopefully this elucidated some like elements of this and where there might be our contrarians trying to like knock her for having this point of view. I really don't see a problem with it. I think if you're being malicious to fans, or if she had this take like 100% of the time, yes, there is a responsibility that comes with being a public figure and a famous person in general. Like, you have a responsibility to, for the most part, do right by your fans, do right just by society at large. I mean, look at billionaires, they sure as fuck don't do that. But in general, there are a lot of nuances to being a celebrity. See what I did there? There are a lot of, you know, black and white things, and there is a little bit of gray here where just because somebody is a performer, it doesn't give somebody the right to invade their space or torment them. And that goes for any person. But it is unfortunate that at the root, I feel like this is a woman problem on some level. I think all celebrities experience this. I mean, look at the Beatles. You can see that, you know, women fans are also problematic. I just sympathize with the struggle of having to balance your mental health and the goodness that is in you to do right by not only yourself, but by everybody else, and how difficult of a balance and a struggle that is. And on a microcosm and a microcosmic level, everybody kind of can feel that and experience that, where you want to do right by the people in your life without it being a detriment to yourself. And for a lot of us people pleasers, that's not an easy thing to do. And grow that times a million, where you have literally millions of eyes on you at any given time. And that pressure can be a lot. So when you meet a celebrity, or if you meet a celebrity, treat them like a human, greet them, ask them how they are. You know, you can say, wow, I love your music, and just appreciate everything that you've done. You know, I'm queer and I'd love to hear about your experience. Just something to create a normal experience and a dialogue. You'll probably, like Drew said, have a better, more authentic experience and have more to talk about if they're in a position to have that with you and they are able to have a discourse with you. You will have a better outcome. And that's just, I think, in general, in life as well. Be respectful of people's space and time and what they have the capacity to do. It might be bigger some days than others. And I would say that's especially true for people who struggle with mental health issues, myself included. Some days I will say, my metaphorical dinner plate can hold more food on it, can hold more capacity for other people. Whereas other days I have to assert, like, when I need the time and space to recuperate and recharge. And that doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make anybody with mental health or mental illness a bad person. So I just urge you to think critically and treat people, all people, with respect, unless they're bigots. For legal purposes, that's a joke. Like I said, if you like this video and you want to see more reactions from me, feel free to leave a comment or watch some of my TikToks. I'll link it below. Some of those more shorter videos are ones that I would like to make more deeper dives on. So if you have seen other videos on my channel, I'd be really curious to see if you like more of the like in-depth research ones or the unscripted rambly ones like this one was. I'm seeking out my style and my flow and what feels right to me in the moment and what I want to cover. So, like I said, I'm going to cover a lot of things about, horror, the queer community, anything that interests me that's going on in the world that I think is worth having my perspective on. So, like I said, subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!